why and the what, I would like to express my high appreciation to the Confederation of Indian Industries and ITC for establishing the Center for Sustainable Development to pursue this agenda for the last 16 years. So far, I was always proud on SAP's journey, lasting for 14 years. Wow, amazing, 16 years. Why is today's topic so important, and how can technology enable and empower businesses to become sustainable, and with that, ensuring the long-term success? Just a few years ago, sustainability was not really a boardroom topic, maybe in the appendix of the pre-read. But now what we have seen over the past years is that stakeholder expectations increase dramatically. We as consumers, we are making now different purchasing decisions. We tend to choose and pick the products we perceive as being more sustainable. They have much higher growth rates. We, in our role as being employees, we love to work for a company which is a role model of a sustainable company. And for the talents we would like to see to apply for a job in our company, for them, it's even more important. At SAP, 94% of all the employees told us how important it is for them that we pursue sustainability. And let's look at the stakeholder group of the investors. They now integrate environmental, social governance data in their investment decisions, and there is this trend towards impact investment. 10 years ago, we had 5.6% coming from the socially responsible investor community being invested in SAP shares. This is now more than 40%. In addition to these increased stakeholder expectations, there are a lot of dynamics going on when it comes to regulation, which is a key challenge for all the companies around the world. And all of these aspects led to that CEOs are now making it strategic priority. Sustainability has clearly evolved to be a core business topic of strategic relevance. What is the role of technology companies, and how can government bodies, business, NGOs, and citizens collaborate to enable a sustainable world? At SAP, our role starts with our purpose to help the world run better and improve people's lives. It is such a bold sustainability statement by itself. And it goes on in our vision to enable the intelligent, sustainable enterprise, to connect these intelligent, sustainable enterprises to business networks in order to accelerate the movement towards sustainable development and for a sustainable world. Our regional president, Paul Marriott, and his team established their vision to empower Asia's sustainable future. So you see, sustainability is a core part of our purpose, our vision, our business strategy. And there are two dimensions to this, being an exemplar and being an enabler. Only by having that ambition to be a role model of a sustainable company, to be an exemplar, we learn a lot and we gain the credibility to act as an enabler. But of course, being an enabler, helping our customers to execute on their more and more sustainable business strategy, that is the biggest lever. That is a multiplier effect to reduce the negative impacts and bring them down to zero and increase the positive impact businesses have. India is on a growth path when it comes to sustainability. There's a lot of opportunity, but clearly urgent action is needed. I attended last year's climate conference, the COP26 in Glasgow, and the Indian Prime Minister announced there the 5 elements of India's climate action plan, ranging from the 500 gigawatt of renewable energy to the non-fossil fuel energy topic, reducing the carbon intensity, reduction of 1 billion tons of carbon emissions, and finally, achieving net zero. Technology can really scale the execution engine to meet these targets. And I would like to take that opportunity to thank Zindu and Kulmit, my great colleagues, and their teams for their excellent contribution. These two persons are the managing directors for Labs organization, our development organization, and for the field organization, our market unit. They see the beautiful business case and they are so passionate about it. And they already achieved a lot. by investing in sustainability, businesses can unlock the competitive growth opportunities, meet these increasing stakeholder expectations. And the foundation for that is, the basis is that we need to change how decisions are made in companies. And don't get me wrong, we are in a business world, though we keep the financial dimension, the financial optimization, but we add to it, what is the impact of our business decisions on us, on people, on society, and what is the impact on the planet? Having that holistic perspective, financial, social, environmental dimension being included, that leads to better business decisions, to better business outcomes, and that ensures the mid and long-term success of your company. And for that, data are needed to make informed decisions at the point of the decision. At SAP, for decades, we helped our customers to manage the material flaws, the financial flaws, and being highly efficient with that. And don't get me wrong, efficiency is super important. But with efficiency alone, we will not tackle and solve today's societal challenges. That is why sustainability is such a strong innovation driver. My hope for this event is that we gather feedback, explore challenges and opportunities together, and treat sustainability like a team sport. I'm personally convinced there's either sustainable business or no business. I wish you now a wonderful and content-rich panel discussion being moderated by my great colleague Susanna, and have a great event. Thank you for having me. It was such a great honor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daniel, for joining us remotely. And I know you need to run for undoubtedly another sustainable business meeting, but thank you so much for joining us, and we'll take it over here in Delhi. Thanks again, Daniel, and have a good day.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah, isn't it great to hear yet another passionate talk about sustainable business? And I do need to say that I'm very honored to be here today with so many passionate people, as well as working for a company that takes sustainability very seriously. As mentioned by Daniel, SAP's purpose is to help the world run better and to improve people's lives. So I'm Susanna Hasenel, and I'm head of sustainability for Asia Pacific and Japan. And I'm part of Daniel's global team to help our customers and partners to implement these sustainability solutions. Today, I'm joined here in Delhi by two distinguished guests, and I would like to start with a short round of introduction before we enter into the discussion. Dr. Rohini Srivatasa is from Microsoft, and she is the National Technology Officer and Head of Strategy for Microsoft India. Welcome, Dr. Rohini. And on my left, I have Mr. Thomas Steenberg-Bonhoff from Novozymes. He's the Vice President for Consumer Biosolutions, as well as Regional President for Asia Pacific, Middle East, and Africa at this leading biotechnology company. But before we enter into the discussions, I would just like to add a few more points to Daniel's opening. And as the previous speakers have also mentioned, we are experiencing dire times. Many extreme weather events are happening around us here in India, in Bengaluru. The floods have also reminded us about the vulnerability here. And a recent research shows that 85% of the world's population have already experienced extreme weather exacerbated by climate change in some shape or form. This is affecting our employees, our customers, our partners, and the ecosystems that we work in. One can say that sustainability is the defining challenge of our times. And while I think there are many reasons to solve these huge challenges, just because of it is the right thing to do, one may also argue that this is perhaps the biggest business opportunity of all times. Governments around the world, including the Indian government here, are setting up policies and programs to support the heightened action to address many sustainability challenges. These include climate change, waste, improving social equalities, as well as addressing challenges with biodiversity and other serious topics. Governments are setting up policies and programs to promote renewable energy, to reduce emissions, and also programs such as the BRSR, which make companies much more accountable in their efforts to measure and address these challenges. But these policies and programs are not enough by themselves if they are not enabled by technology. And that is the topic of our discussion today. I would just like to share a few more points about SAP's sustainability journey. And it has indeed been a journey that started to unfold many, many years ago, and that is still ongoing. At SAP, we're focused on helping to reduce emissions, be it greenhouse gases, carbon, water, or other emissions. We are focused on reducing waste, the different forms of it, as well as improving social equalities. And as part of our own journey, which Daniel has been involved in since 2014 as the Chief Sustainability Officer, we have banned all single-use plastics in our offices. We have set ourselves the ambitious goal of becoming carbon neutral in terms of our own operations and parts of our value chains by next year, end of next year. And in terms of equality, here in Asia Pacific and Japan, including India, we have 37% participation of females in the workforce. However, in our leadership team, in our senior leadership team, which I'm also part of, we have a 50% female representation. And a number of research shows that companies with more diverse workforce innovate more, deliver more sustainable results, as well as have better financial results. So there are all the reasons to go for diversity. Whilst our journey to sustainability has been unique to our company, we recognize that companies typically undergo 3 key steps on their sustainability transformation. Step 1 is about establishing transparency about the sustainability performance, and this requires data. This requires sustainability metrics and data to be available in a timely, high quality, and also increasingly auditable manner. Here in India, I understand that CFOs need to sign off sustainability reports. How can you be sure that this data is valid unless you have a solid governance around it? Step 2 is about making this data available in all key processes and decisions. Because once a year reporting is only the starting point, but we really need to operationalize sustainability. And this data needs to be transparently available for the key teams that operatively take these key decisions, be it in terms of human capital management, procurement, or operations, or any other materially relevant part of the business. Only this way can we change business as usual, which used to be focused on top line and bottom line only, to also include green line as a key metric. And the third step on this journey that we observe many organizations to take is to actually extend these efforts across the company's own 4 walls. We're talking about the entire value chain, supply chain, the ecosystems in which we operate. All these efforts to make sustainability performance more transparent need to be extended into the wider ecosystem, both in the natural as well as in the business sense. And just to give you a couple of examples how SAP is supporting this, we are a member of the automotive alliance called Catena X, where a number of leading car manufacturers and their suppliers have come together to share sustainability data on an open data platform that is governed and allows them to do this carbon data sharing, for instance, in a standardized yet safe and open manner. This puts procurement officers into the position to make the most sustainable purchasing decisions, not just based on limited views of their tier 1 and 2 suppliers, but based on the accumulative emissions from the entire supply chain. We think about commodities, and this could be renewable energy, this could be palm oil, this could be green hydrogen. These products now come at a premium, but the buyers are looking for assurance that the products that they are buying are really as green as they've been sold at. For this purpose, we are helping organizations to create digital twins that run in blockchain technology networks, and where organizations can follow how these communities travel in the value chain, adding carbon emissions and other attributes as the goods move along the value chain. So as you can see, technology is a key enabler of sustainable transformation at scale. With this, I would like to turn to Dr. Rohini, who's also working in technology here in India. And Dr. Rohini, would you please like to share with us how Microsoft is addressing these huge challenges, sustainability challenges here in India with technology, and otherwise perhaps as well a little bit.
Thank you, Susanna. So let me start by saying, and which some of the previous speakers have also spoken about, that climate change sustainability is a planet-sized challenge. It is something that we are seeing in front of our eyes, but it is evolving slowly. The approach that Microsoft has taken, and I'm speaking from the organization's perspective, and I also talk about how we are working in India, is to say what are the areas we will focus on. And there are 4 areas we have selected: carbon, water, waste, and ecosystems. Now, the issue is that no one organization can do this alone. At the end of the day, this is going to require our customers, partners, and the ecosystem. So what I'd like to share a little bit about is across the different stakeholders, how are we working today, and in the spirit of sharing learnings, because like I said, no one organization can do this alone. So Microsoft has put forth certain targets by 2030 to become carbon negative, water positive, zero waste. But I think it's not just the targets, it's the ability to year on year report transparently as to how you're doing against those targets and what are you learning along the way. Because I don't think anybody has all the answers. It is our ability to be able to share learnings, share transparently what we are doing. It's what's going to help us as a community, as a species, if I may put it that way. So let me talk about the different stakeholders we are working with. I think from perspective of our own products and services, there is areas where we are working in terms of making sure that the availability of data with our customers is there in a format, in a standardized manner that allows people to both measure as well as then act upon that data. So there is a Microsoft Cloud for Sustainability that is out there in terms of standardizing data and where partners are building solutions on top of. Similarly, there are areas that we're working on in terms of creating trackers as well as working with our partner, many of who are here, who are, think of Johnson Controls, ABB, many of our system integrators, Infosys, all of them who are working with us in terms of creating the right products and solutions to manage. Now, if I go down the broader ecosystem of policy and the community, For example, we've started something called a Green Software Foundation. As you might be aware, that software itself needs to become more sustainable. So along with Accenture, GitHub, and a few other players, we are working on being able to help developers create software that is more sustainable. Very recently, we announced a partnership with McKinsey because many of the sustainability journeys are not just technology journeys, they really are business transformation journeys. So bringing our technology along with McKinsey's thinking and expertise around business transformation is another place. In India, I would say there are very specific things we are doing, especially with social entrepreneurs, helping social entrepreneurs who are focusing on sustainability scale, go global, and find the right expertise, both on technology as well as go to market. So just as an overall, I think the ecosystem approach that we are taking looks at customers, partners, our products and services, the policy and innovation that we need to drive, as well as our employees in being able to take the entire ecosystem together.
Thank you, Dr. Rohini. And would you be able to share us some more examples of these initiatives that you're running?
Sure. So, for example, I was mentioning about the kind of innovation that we are driving. So, one of the examples is there's a climate innovation fund that has been launched by Microsoft a few years ago with about $1 billion to invest in technology that is not yet been created. Because for certain things like carbon removal are areas which need investment to even the technology doesn't exist. So some of those areas are happening. For example, another area which we are working on is what is called a planetary computer. The idea is that many non-governmental organizations, academics, etc., need data to work on sustainability topics, whether it's water, whether it's biodiversity. Availability of that data in an open data format is a prerequisite. And that's another area we are working on in terms of enabling the ecosystem.
Yeah, I think the topic of open data platforms has been mentioned here a few times. And I think we cannot stress enough the importance of such things to create a transparency in the ecosystem and value chains, right? Absolutely. Thomas, you work in a very different kind of technology area, biotechnology, if I got that right?
Right about that, yes.
What are your thoughts on biotechnology as an enabler of a more sustainable future?
Thank you, Susanna, and thank you, Rohini, as well, and to CII for this opportunity. Just like sustainability has different phases, so does technology. And now you've heard the voices of two of the most respected and impactful big tech companies in the world. I would like to give you a little bit of an example of how biotechnology, so another technology platform, why that has relevance for a sustainable future in India. And I'd also like to make a comment on what I hope that technology can provide for our society down the line. So biotechnology is a field that has some mystique around it. It's not very easily understood and broadly recognized in our society, yet it is all around us. So biotechnology is a technology platform that takes inspiration of nature and will work with nature's own tools and biology, tweak it, adapt it for an application. So today, most biotechnology in the world is in the space of pharmaceutical technology. Many of us have, over the last 2 years, been exposed to a vaccine that would not have been made possible without biotechnology and all the tools that are there. So we are very thankful and appreciate that as consumers and individuals in our societies, how biotechnology is helping us through a pandemic. Now, biotechnology is also used in agriculture and in for industrial purposes. And the company I work for, Novozymes, we've been working in industrial biotechnology for the last 80 years. I would like to give you an example of what that could look like and why that is relevant. But if we first just comment on the aim of this, so technology is an enabler of a more sustainable future. And as I was just saying, sustainability can have different phases. So if we take it from a CO2 emissions, from a climate change perspective, clearly there's something as to that we as a society have to figure out how we generate energy, how we use energy, how we make an effective usage of energy and also decrease waste of energy.
And Thomas, can I ask you on that note, what is the role of biotechnology in all of that?
So we hope to have a stab at some of it. We may not have, to Rohini's point, all the answers. But if we take the field of, take biofuels, for instance. So biofuels as a technology, as a solution, is a liquid energy form. Today in the world, the transportation sector is the largest emitting, CO2 emitting sector globally. And clearly, that poses the challenge that we need to reduce the demand for fuels in the world. Now, we need to electrify the mobilization of people and goods. That's one thing. We also need to set standards for the vehicles that we use in the world. But we also need to reduce the footprint of the existing and growing fleet that is there. So today in India, there'll be about 10,000 vehicles sold. They are not electric. The problem and the emissions today of the transportation sector is growing. Now, biofuels is a liquid energy form that is used or that is created from either primary crop or residues and waste of agriculture. And if we take that, that basically means that that liquid fuel has less emissions than what a petrochemical or what a petro-derived petroleum would entail. So when you put it into the tank, it basically means that you emit less when you go for your ride. Now, just 85 kilometers from here, last month, Mr. Modi, he inaugurated the first plant in India that uses agricultural waste to convert that into liquid fuels based on Indian engineering craft and genuity and Danish-Indian biotechnology. So the solution is there. There is a policy in place, but that doesn't mean that the problem is solved. It means we need to accelerate that deployment of technology. We need to fund it, and we need to do that at pace.
If I may just add to the couple of
Yes.
things you said. So the kind of things that you are doing is what we see as a way to enable. For example, what we were talking about earlier, many of the chemical reactions and many of the experiments that you might try, high performance computing and a lot of simulation work is what Microsoft would enable an organization like Novozymes to be able to experiment with, simulate, and create. When you go and work with a customer in terms of what your solution impacted, that customer's ability to measure their scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 emissions, that is where the calculator comes into play to be able to even say what was the impact, not to speak about the regulator. What I was saying is that I think there is a lot of complementarity into what you were explaining, and I was thinking about the ways in which a computing engine supports it or enables it.
Yeah, but
Absolutely.
And if we stay on this topic a little bit, I mean, I always love when we get to talk about life sciences and ICT technology, because I think that's perhaps the most exciting field there is. But perhaps a question to you, Dr. Rohini. We know that we have natural sciences, life sciences, and more like computer-centric sciences. Where do you see the need right now to invest mostly? Is it more in life sciences, or have we got that figured out? Or is it more enabling all these life sciences come into play through technology? And I'll give you the mic to you also in a moment, Thomas. But Dr. Rohini, if you'd like to start with.
Very interesting question. In fact, Thomas and I were having a chat about this earlier, and I was claiming that I think if I were to make a prediction on spaces which will be groundbreaking, they are going to be in the intersection of biology and computing. And when I say biology, I'm meaning in a broader way, whether it is climate sciences, it is biodiversity, it is healthcare, it is food, all of those areas, right? Because many of these spaces are becoming data-driven. And if you think about genetics, for example, a lot of the work that is happening in the intersection of computation and biology is really transforming these industries. Now, it's actually a very interesting point, because actually biology is also impacting computation. There is work happening, for example, in neuromorphic computation, which is taking inspiration from how the brain is able to compute with very low energy intensity, and how computation can learn from how biology works to be more efficient. So it's actually both ways. It is ability of computation to impact biology, climate science, and many of the topics we have been discussing, but it's both ways. So that both are very active areas of research.
So a symbiotic relationship between computer science, data science, and life sciences. What would you say, Thomas?
So Rohini just made the speech for biotechnology, and I'll make the speech for technology.
Fact.
No, but we share that, and of course it's not one or the other, and these things move in tandem and need to move in tandem. We would be nowhere without digital technologies. We would be nowhere without data, computational power, and all of that has been developed, also with the usage of Microsoft and SAP. Now, I think when it comes to how we deploy these technologies, there are different roles that we face here, right? And that both mean there's a corporate role, there's also a governmental role, and then there's a science role. Now, let's park the science role, because we want to be smarter and develop things, and that will come. Now, when it comes to governments, for instance, governments need to fund the future and not the past. That would be one thing. Governments need to enable that society knows the cost of our actions. That means putting a price on carbon and pollution. And governments need to acknowledge that the way they have set up regulatory frames, whatever it may be, has been created for an infrastructure that is the past, meaning time for approvals, how we assess data, all of that stuff is happening or has been constructed for a different purpose. That needs to change. Corporates clearly need to understand that they have a role in enabling a brighter future. I would say to the corporates that are on the journey, well, we all represent organizations that have targets and obey by them and disclose and all of that. I would say to companies, clearly start that journey, start measuring, start being transparent about where you're good and less good. I would also inspire companies to start working with the price of carbon.
This is indeed a common practice in many organizations,
Yes.
and we see quite a difference in the price range, though, ranging from some $10, $20 per ton to even $100, $150 or more per ton. But I'd like to say a little bit more in this space of what governance can do in terms of fostering this symbiotic relationship between life sciences and computer sciences. And Thomas, you mentioned earlier that speeding up approvals would certainly help in terms of getting these technologies adopted faster. Dr. Rohini, I believe you are involved in a number of public-private sector collaborations and other initiatives. Could you share with us which of these kind of initiatives do you see as most promising ones for solving these huge challenges that we have with extreme weather, energy transition, and improving social equalities as well?
So I'd like to first add to what Thomas was talking about. I think in a country like, in a democracy like India, governments are responsible, but they will move if the public is knowledgeable, understands, and asks the right questions. So I think one of the very important things for us as a country is that we increase the awareness and nuanced understanding of sustainability across our population, starting from schools, starting from colleges, as well as our industry. On that regard, I think there is quite a bit of content out there. Microsoft has material that is available freely out on our learning sites where people can go and understand the nuanced understanding of this, because as Thomas was also saying, if you don't measure it, if you don't understand the true cost of what you are doing, you will never address it. You need to understand what is the impact you're having on the ecosystem, not just on your direct connections. And we all face that in our daily lives. If we don't measure our water usage, if we don't measure the impact of waste in our economy, we will never address it. So I think that is the first important thing. I think in terms of working with the ecosystem, I spoke earlier. Look, again, we cannot do this alone. When I say we, Microsoft cannot do this alone. So our ability to work with the ecosystem, and that means our customers and partners. Many companies in India, in fact, many of you are here in the audience, are really thinking very deeply about sustainability and are putting specific initiatives into action. We are working with many of you in enabling you with technology, enabling you with the ability to measure and make that difference. Similarly, I spoke about partners. Our partners are the ones who create solutions that you can utilize, whether it is on water management, whether it is IoT-driven devices, whether it is on machine failure on a plant. Because when a machine fails on a plant, actually it's a sustainability problem, because the rest of the machines are running idle and no output has been created. So you've created energy loss. So it's actually a sustainability problem. Similarly, if you look at buildings that are not managed with the right electricity and energy use, which is where digital twins come in, which is where IoT and some of the solutions that we have out come in. So our ability to work with customers and partners is the second point. The third is NASSCOM and CII, like industry bodies, are putting major initiatives out there to help the industry understand this issue and move forward. We are working with these industry bodies in terms of ensuring that we are bringing our learnings to the country, as well as creating the right solutions and approaches for India.
Thank you very much for sharing that, Dr. Rohini. I would actually like to come back to the point of externality. Sorry, I don't seem to be able to pronounce external costs, which may actually not be expressed or articulated in companies' balance sheets. So we talked earlier about internal cost of carbon, and that is becoming more and more accepted as an internal measure of certain activities and in the context of assessing any type of investment. But I think what many organizations also struggle with is the expression of the value of many sustainability activities, just because there isn't necessarily a market of such services directly today. So I'd like to ask you, Thomas and Dr. Rohini, whether your companies have actually made some efforts to express both the kind of negative externalities as well as positive externalities as part of your sustainability efforts, and to actually arrive at some kind of quantified view of the different efforts, positive and negative, in terms of dollar or other currency figures.
Yes, we work with that in two ways. And Dr. Schmidt said it earlier in terms of setting the example and enabling the solution. So when it comes to setting the example, it's about data generation, it's about understanding where you have your emissions, it's about disclosing that. We do that as a company. Now, when it comes to the enablement, we use a science called life cycle assessments. It's a cradle to grave view on what is a typical emissions profile of a value chain. If you insert biotechnology, what is the emissions profile of this value chain now? And then you measure every time we sell a solution, for instance, into biofuels, and 10% of the tank is a biofuel and is not petroleum, then that represents an emissions reduction that we talk about. So Novozymes, we can say that we enable 80 million tons of CO2 reduction in the world. So if you took out Novozymes, you would take out our own emissions, yes, but you would also take out 80 million, you would add 80 million tons of CO2 into the atmosphere because the technology solutions would not enable a lower footprint. So that stems, we've made an investment. We have a team that works with life cycle assessments. We do that in-house, we peer review, all of that stuff. Now, if I may say what I hope that the two organizations next to me and similar companies will offer is this on the transparency measure, which is incredibly important. Now, we are, as a company, as an example, we run SAP. We've done that for 25 years, meaning we can see what goes into our materials, where are they in inventory, what do they cost, all of that stuff. Now, through that SAP platform, I cannot see the emissions of the individual components. Why can I not see the emissions profile of the individual components? Why can I not compute it directly every time I know it cost me $1 to produce a product? Why can I not see the emissions that are also the cost of that product? I would hope that down the line, SAP and Microsoft enable that, at least on scope 1 and 2 emissions. Scope 3, it starts to be a little bit more hairy, but that data generation will also come.
I see a need for me to perhaps share a little bit more about SAP's sustainability solutions. But let me put this, first of all, into a little bit broader context. We indeed see many organizations that historically have looked at the life cycle emissions of a product and used certain data points or also perhaps literature averages to arrive at certain emissions factors. But indeed, the big trend now is to move away from such averages and look at the material flows, look at the logistics, look at what happens in the value chains, and actually move away from averages to actuals. And by looking at the real world events in a world, either measure directly emissions or attach those with much more granular emission values. So, and if you look at the company's operations, there's maybe certain things that they have quite a good visibility, but what happens in the value chains, in the distribution chains, this is the next big challenge that certainly we at SAP and I believe also Microsoft are addressing increasingly, so that we start getting that real measurements from all different parts of the economic activities.
We'll buy the upgrade when you get there.
Yes, great. Dr. Rohini, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, no, I think I would agree. What I would agree on is that I don't think we've solved that problem. I think the problem, what I mean by that is, so look, for example, at Microsoft, when we talked about net zero goals, right? That includes scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 emissions. Now, scope 1, scope 2, we are doing good. But scope 3, to be transparent, we could do better. And the reality is that we are asking, and we are not a manufacturing company, right? But we are, even from perspective, we manufacture certain things, but as a technology platform company, we are asking our suppliers to report their emissions. And today, some 87% of our suppliers are reporting. Now, that's a good question to ask because that tells our downstream and upstream supplier chain to be aware that, you know, our procurement, our supply value chain will be measured based on what they do. But that's the first step. I think then the ability to go, so just asking is not enough, which is what goes to my earlier point to say, how can we make our suppliers use solutions that are then provided by our partners and the ecosystem to do better? So that's why it becomes an ecosystem play, because we can do so much, but we have to think of this at a global scale to even create the technology, to even ensure that, and we talked about the data part. So now if you've created the technology, how do you now measure to ensure that it is doing what it was supposed to do, which is where the whole data problem comes in, which is where the cloud for sustainability comes in. So I think it becomes measuring, impacting, and ensuring that you are continuously in that loop.
And Dr. Rohini, would you like to share whether you see such developments in particular sectors here in India, especially where certain ecosystems are coming together to share that kind of data effectively with each other in the interest of optimizing the outcomes for from a systemic perspective?
I think in India, the fact that our SEBI, our regulator is asking across the board for the top companies to provide this data is a huge enabler. And that therefore across sectors, we are seeing companies, we had the ITC conversation in the morning, many of our partners are here. So we're seeing across sectors a lot of knowledge and fairly nuanced understanding of sustainability. If I look at the big sectors, and clearly the government and some of the larger public sector organizations in the oil and gas world, in the manufacturing world, are making important commitments and important strides in that direction. So I think from a perspective of the regulator, the major sectors in the economy, and from a sector perspective, I would say, and the third point which I want to bring out from a sector perspective is it is cross-sector. But if I look at the IT industry is being driven from their customers globally to say that you need to make sure that you are following sustainability as an important driver, as even an enabler to do business. So there are multiple factors which are coming into play to ensure that the cross-sector focus on sustainability is strong.
Thomas, would you like to add something to that from the biotechnology perspective?
And I fully support that, and I think on that data generation and asking the questions and following up, that's what we need to do. And now you're not a manufacturing company like Novozymes would be. When we start asking those questions, you will find that very, very, very few are able to articulate an answer today. So the data mapping is not happening, broadly speaking. So as an example, we're choosing a new logistics provider in Asia. I cannot get a data point to what are the emissions that all our warehousing would have today. I can't get that. Just asking that question will make half of them uneasy, and the other half will basically say they're not going to get there. Yeah. And they may not be in a position to buy all the solutions from companies like you today. So how do we make that happen? Is that a governmental thing? Is it that we try working together with technology and business industries to make that happen? I don't know, but it needs to happen if we are to make the right choices. And just to perhaps to that point on choices, many of the solutions that can help us towards 1.5 degrees or 2 degrees are already there, but they're not being used. So that's one thing. The second thing is that it does mean that we need to make choices. And some of those choices are not necessarily choices that we think of we need to make, or that are not nice choices, right? And it's in everything, right? It's how we consume. It's, if we take today as an example, it's 31 degrees outside. It's about 13 degrees in here. Someone has made an implicit choice to cool it down. What the hell is going on?
I think on the choices part, right, just to add, that's another responsibility that as large organizations we have to have the consumer have the information in terms of their making choices. And today the young population, young employees want to know what companies are doing in terms of sustainability. Yes. And they are making choices in terms of which organization they join based on some of these criteria. It is an important element. So I think it then goes back to information and awareness of students and colleges and people to be able to make those choices, because that's when, for example, when you make a choice of a logistics provider, you are effectively putting forth a chain reaction in terms of which company does well in that space.
Yes, there's an opportunity. The one that could answer that question and come up with a credible plan, I would put up there, right?
Exactly.
But let me ask you, would you also pay a premium for that?
Yes, but not necessarily do I think it requires a premium.
Today, a lot of sustainable choices are still associated with a premium price. How do you see this evolving moving forward? And what's the role of technology in this?
Yes, so yes, that is clearly the case. And I have full understanding that many companies or consumers are not in a position to pay for things, but they are not paying the right price today. We kid ourselves if we think that running a fleet, say we take the logistic provider again, running a fleet with 100 old vehicles versus running a fleet with 100 new vehicles, that does not drive a different cost for our society.
Yeah, I agree. And I think I would add that there are some areas where the price differential could be there, but I think there is so much potential to remove waste
Fully
that
agree.
before we get to the challenge, the perceived challenge that cost is the problem, we actually have a lot of water, energy. You talked about the temperature. A lot of that waste to remove before we get worried. Now, having said that, I'll give you an interesting story of sustainable farming that is a very interesting luxury item that has happened. So I'll give you an example. There is a place in Telangana, state of Telangana, called Araku Valley. I don't know if you follow it. There is a set of village farmers, community farming, who have rejuvenated that area through biodiversity and very biologically, ecologically sound farming, and have created a brand of coffee that has gone to Europe and Paris as a luxury brand. Now, to me, I'm not saying that's the way to do it, but I'm saying there is an opportunity to really empower people at the ground level to do sustainable development, sustainable farming. And there is a population that is interested and is very much willing to pay premium for it if it is done in the right way and adheres to the transparency discussion that we've had earlier.
Yet not everyone can afford it. But of course, I think the industries need to work to make these sustainable changes more affordable.
It's not a mass market point anyway.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to say is that there are those niches that one can look at, but clearly from a mass market perspective, there are a lot of areas, whether it's water, it's waste, it's energy, there are tremendous efficiencies to be first addressed.
And just on that, I think when it comes to the cost, when you stack it up at a societal level, they are already there.
Yep.
Why do people get
They're just not being measured.
Why does it cost to change, or take the case of Pakistan now with all the floodings, the cost of there we look at as something else. Well, it's the system that has created it. So if we try to add those two together, we're already paying.
Yeah, exactly.
And Dr. Rohini is still talking about eliminating waste in the broadest sense. How can technology help with that? What are the top ways that technology can assist in reducing waste?
Okay, we could go on and we can spend the entire day on that. Let's pick one industry. Let's pick up the retail industry, right? There is tremendous amount of clothing. Clothing is in fact one of the huge sources of waste that when we change clothing, it goes into dumps. Now, there is work happening around the world on circular economy for clothing. And for especially fashion areas, which many people who use fashion work don't use it for more than once. Now, there is a way to make it. And how does technology help there? IoT sensors and QR codes. There are many ways to make sure that you have a circular economy for, let's say, fashion clothing. Let's go into logistics, the supply chain for retail. How do you make sure that your fleet is following both energy efficient fuels as well as travel routing or optimization of your fleet delivery system? Now let's look at warehousing. How do warehouses make sure that you are keeping the heating and the cooling, etc., at optimal levels. You can go on and on and on. Every industry in terms of energy, if you look at the entire supply chain, whether it's customers, it's retail, again, go back. If you have the ability to have every SKU that's out there in your retail shelves, and I'm not picking on the retail industry particularly, I'm just saying as an example, every industry has got basic operations, energy management, the ability to get people, and the earlier point we had in terms of being able to even measure in their supply chain what the scope 3 and external emissions are. There are scope for and technology comes in many ways. I mean, whether it is digital twins, whether it is remote collaboration, all of those are ways in which one is looking at technology as ways of eliminating waste.
Thank you, Dr. Rohini. And Thomas, would you be able to share some examples from Novozymes where you have reduced waste or improved efficiencies using technology?
Yeah, but as a manufacturing company, we try to do that each and every day we go to work. We try to figure out, can we use the cooling water? Can we use the leftovers of fermentation? We use a manufacturing base of fermentation. We've installed biogas facilities at our plants where we use our own leftovers. Actually, in Copenhagen, we have a plant in Denmark where the cooling water for our fermentation goes into heating about 6,000 homes in Copenhagen. So we are doing it the whole time. But I think that on the transparency side that you mentioned there, Rohini, I really buy into. And there are these choices that we as a consumers also need to make. And it starts with awareness. We need to know that it takes about 270 liters of water to produce a T-shirt. That's also the cost you pay when you buy a T-shirt. Yes. We need to acknowledge that about a third, up towards 50% of textile end in a landfill within the first year of production.
Yes.
And I hope that technology, blockchain, whatever it'll be, will map out where fundamentally things are wrong.
So I think the challenge for today's business leaders is to make sustainability profitable and profitability sustainable. We have heard about many ways as to how to address that, reducing efficiencies, making better use of data, creating greater transparency in the value chains by different ways, although it is still a journey, I think, to address, for instance, all the 15 categories of scope 3 emissions that lie outside the company's own four walls. But we have a lot of practitioners here. So what would be the one final message that you would like to share with our audience here today in Delhi and also online, as in where to start in your view? What's the one action that everyone here, after leaving this conference today, should take in case they haven't already taken that?
I think my first principle, I think everybody in this room is here because you care. If you can go from here and have 5 more people more knowledgeable about sustainability, which ask the right questions to their employers, to their customers, to your partners, then I think we are doing the right thing. But I think it beyond your just awareness, then the question becomes is that because this topic is relatively complex, you have to get nuanced understanding. You already heard Thomas talk about that many of the costs we are not even measuring. So our ability to get more aware and ask the right questions, I would put it at that first level. That starts the right circle in terms of then making the choices, asking your employees, asking your customers, and that's the first thing I would ask you to do.
And just to amplify that a little bit with technology, perhaps I may request everyone to write a little LinkedIn post about that and share with their networks and ecosystem about the ideas that you have gained here. Thomas, what's your final advice?
I don't think it's all doom and gloom. The solutions are there. We need to drive towards those solutions, I think it starts with every individual taking responsibility. And if we take it into an organizational fashion, that acknowledge the responsibility that your organization, the one you represent, has, but also try to appreciate the opportunity that will come. And just because your customer has not asked about it just yet, doesn't mean that you cannot put a value to that opportunity and sell that. That will happen and I only think it will accelerate over the next 5-10 years as organizations are able to deliver that value component.
Thomas, Dr. Rohini, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Susanne.
Please let's give a warm applause to all these